Bonjour, Kinamagi and Nene Ireland Indigenous, and welcome to this production of Social Studies Explorer. Today's episode, Settling the New England Colonies. Our story begins here, on the banks of the North Sea. The United Kingdom, or England, was controlled by a monarch and featured an official state religion, the Church of England. There was a group known as the Separatists that did not support all of the doctrines of the church and wanted to leave to another place, and they chose the Netherlands. Unfortunately for them, the Netherlands didn't end up being their top choice, as they were not thrilled that their children were being exposed to the Dutch culture in the Netherlands. And they will eventually get on a boat, one of which was known as the Mayflower, and set all the way across the Atlantic in Plymouth, Massachusetts, the infamous Plymouth Rock. Plymouth, Massachusetts is located in the New England states, which feature Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Maine, which at that time was a possession of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And now we also consider Vermont to be one of the New England states. Near Plymouth is where we also find Boston, which will become a major city in this region. Providence plays a role in our story, as does Hartford. You can see that the climate and environment is going to be different in this region. As compared to Michigan, it's at a similar latitude, which means it's going to be cooler than Virginia going down into Georgia. It's also a rockier area, and areas that is not going to be so well suited for agriculture or farming. Let's look at what we are supposed to be focused on when we talk about the New England colonies. We should talk about patterns of settlement and control, including the impact of geography on settlement, interactions with indigenous people, including trade, growth of small farms and non-agricultural economies, the development of government, including the establishment of town meetings, and religious tensions that led to the establishment of other colonies in New England. So let's go back to that geography for a few moments. And one thing that we're going to find is a lot of trees. This area over here is mountainous, or at least really big hills, depending on your point of view. There's a lot of trees, and there are plenty of rivers. This will allow the production of lumber and being able to set it out. The rivers are going to be the highways of the New England colonies, and therefore that's where people are going to eventually try to live. That way you have water to drink, water to power industry, water for your fields, water to bathe, all of those things constitute the reasons that people live near water versus in the middle of a desert. We have some readings here that we can use for discussion. The influence of geography. Obviously, with a rockier soil, you're not going to get people looking to try to grow huge fields of tobacco, or definitely not rice, as it's a little bit cooler in this area. The rocky soil just doesn't well suit for that. We also, with the number of trees, people who wanted to work as lumbermen or as trappers would find these forests as a very useful resource. The reasons for founding, in the case of Plymouth, was their so-called pursuit of religious freedom, which really should be kind of considered religious freedom for them, their freedom to do what they wanted to do. There are multiple groups. We talk about the separatists or the pilgrims, and then we have the Puritans. Uh, a lot of religion plays a huge role. In fact, colonies such as Connecticut and Rhode Island are formed because the religious interest of each community was so powerful that if you spoke against it, you were liable to be exiled. And in the case of Anne Hutchinson, Mr. Williams, they're sent off and they form colonies near present day Rhode Island. We have Thomas Hooker, who thinks that there's too much power in the government. He goes off and sets up Connecticut. So the reasons for founding include the conflict with the town councils and their religious fanaticism. Economic activities, fishing is a huge one. English had been fishing off here for quite a while. Obviously, this would have been a food source that they would have realized well before they even got here, but also when they would see the indigenous people and being able to fish the rivers and the coastal waterways. Lumbering is a huge one, and a lot of the products that require a great source of wood. Some of the pull factors that you would move here, you're looking at places that you can have some sort of religious independence, new jobs. Some of the things that would push you around is if you were happen to speak out against the religious interest in one of the Puritan towns, they might send you out. We also find in the development of New England colonies this awesome thing called the town hall, where if it had truly been for everyone, would have been a true democracy, but they would get together and pass laws where every eligible person, aka wealthy landowning Caucasians, were able to get together and help vote on all the laws. Nowadays, with our Republican form of government, we elect people to vote for us. In these communities, they were all voting. So let's read a little bit about the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Notice it's not just Massachusetts, it's the Massachusetts Bay Colony. In 1629, a group of Puritans joined other people in England to form the New England Company. The same year, the king granted the company a charter. This allowed them to settle in the region called New England. The first group of Puritans sailed to New England that year. They began a settlement named Salem on Massachusetts Bay. Salem might rattle your memory a little bit, as that would be also the home of the witch trials. In 1630, John Winthrop brought a second and much larger group of Puritans from England to settle in the same area. The group included nearly 1,000 colonists traveling on 11 ships. He decided Salem was not the perfect place and went to a nearby area called Shawmut, which he renamed Boston after his hometown in England. Just like in Plymouth, the first year was very difficult, and about 200 settlers died. Another 200 returned to England in the spring of 1631. Things improved, and during the next 20 years, more than 20,000 people settled in the colony. They were mostly Puritans. The Puritans built many new villages. Many were near Boston. Life in these villages was centered around the Puritan church, which had strict rules. In the beginning, Puritan settlers got along fairly well with the Native Americans of the area. However, as the Puritans began to spread out in the region, conflicts with Native Americans increased. The region supported many different economic activities. Although the soil was rocky, some people were still able to grow crops on small farms. Other people cut lumber and used it to build houses and ships. Fishing was also important in the colony. The colony leaders enforced strict Puritan ways of life and laws. People who did not follow Puritan ways were told to leave the colony. As a result of this, new colonies were founded in the region. One of those colonies is Rhode Island. Roger Williams left England in 1631 and settled in Salem in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Soon after, he became a minister. He was popular among the people and had many followers. He began to speak out against some Puritan ways. For example, he did not think it was fair for people to be punished if their beliefs were different from the Puritan leaders. He stated his beliefs in the sermons at church and also in a letter he wrote to Governor Winthrop. He became very unpopular with other ministers and with the governor. In 1635, Puritan leaders voted to force him to leave the colony. Roger Williams fled from Salem to an area known as Narragansett Bay. There he was helped by Narragansett Native Americans. In 1636, many of his followers from the Massachusetts Bay Colony left and joined Williams. He bought land for the Native Americans and began a settlement he called Providence. He set up a government that was based on the agreement of the settlers and religious freedom. Soon after Roger Williams was forced to leave the Massachusetts Bay Colony, another person began to speak out against strict Puritan practices. Her name was Anne Hutchinson. She began to hold meetings in her home where she criticized the Puritan ministers. These meetings began to attract many followers. In 1637, Anne Hutchinson was brought to trial for speaking out and acting against the Puritan leaders. She was found guilty and ordered to leave the Massachusetts Bay Colony. She moved with her family and many of her followers to the area of Narragansett Bay and began a settlement on an island near Providence. Later, her settlement joined with the one Roger Williams had founded. This became the Rhode Island Colony. We have now reached the part where we'll be assessing. You have the option of filling out this paper copy and returning it during our next paper exchange. There is going to be a Google form of this, or you could choose to create a Flipgrid video where you answer the question orally and submit it via Flipgrid, which is always a lot of fun. If you have any questions or need further resources on the New England colonies, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm Ireland at sagchipschool.net. Hope you all have a minute, Gijagad, and Bama P.